Hello! Welcome to the next episode of History's All Right. Because today we're going to talk a bit video games and how history can help us making video games. Now, video games are of course very broad, and so's history. But you've got to have a bit of focus. In a sense, because you can't just compile the whole of history into one video game. Doing everything. There's just not enough RAM in the world to have an entire history of humanity, even if we just take the roughly 6,000 years where there's recorded history, or something like that. Even if we just take that stretch of time, there's just too much. But you knew that already. But that also means there's good selective genres. I mean, you can have strategy games, point-and-click adventure games, cooking simulator games. I mean, that's an idea. Restaurant Manager, set in the ancient Roman era. You know, cooking up takeaways for the Romans. It happened. But hey, I'm not going to try and cover everything. That's impossible. But what I can do, give a few pointers. So the first thing is, know your setting. Because you might find something really fun and novel, like the gun shield. Doesn't that sound epic to have in a game? You know, it's like a shield with a gun inside it. From the Renaissance. As far as I know, I've looked into it, and there seems to be one gun shield that we've found, apart from some Victorian replicas and stuff like that. But point is, the gun shield wasn't particularly common. So having an entire army equipped with them is not very historical. But if you're using history as an inspiration for your setting that's a bit more fanciful, fantastical, rather... Sorry, English fails me sometimes, but more to the point. When you have a more fantastical setting that's inspired by history, then the more novel stuff can come in. So that's an important thing to check. How much is it history? Is it meant to be a realistic history game? Or is history the inspiration for the setting? Or perhaps there's a lot more mix and match, like, say, Civilization. You know, the old, you can build the Taj Mahal in Cleveland in 390 BC, in theory. But the point is, it's, in a lot of ways, Civilization's more of an exploration of human achievement rather than a documentation of historical events. I mean, whereas something like Company of Heroes is more is more going through the history of these events, although, as I said in Company of Heroes 3, your ability to recreate or rewrite history, but from what I can tell of the game, obviously it's not like you can just bring in aliens, some kind of alien space bat technology that can, you're not rewriting history that much. But that brings me on to another point. Know the capabilities of your period. Because, okay, I made a video where I did a little sketch involving Call of Duty in the War of Independence. Brandon F. very kindly let me use some of his footage. Thanks, Brandon. F. Sorry, I should be a bit more polite. What is the point? Let me use some of the footage so that I could get shot, so that I could have someone shooting back at me. Because, hey. And he's, you know, you can seem to be quite understanding of why it needed to be a bit, why, at least on my end, it needed to be a bit farby. His stuff isn't farb, mine was, because when you're trying to create Call of Duty in this time period. But, point is, the FPS shooter that we all know and love in a lot of ways, you know, you being your almost, well, I mean, it varies from first-person shooter to first-person shooter, but being a one-man army, as the expression goes, really requires a firepower revolution, you know. So if you're setting it in the future, fine, you can have whatever Star Trek technology you're... Well, I say Star Trek technology, you know what I mean. You can have whatever kind of, like, far-flung future tech you want. Set it in the modern era, more limited in what your one-man army can do, but you've got plenty of capabilities, you know, fully automatic weapons that an individual can carry. World War II, there are some full automatics and you can do all sorts of things like that, and that, you know, you can still fight very much as an individual, and while it's somewhat of a stretch from how real combat works, there are ways of implementing that. You know, team functions. So, games like Squad, if I remember rightly, cover that a lot better. But, you know, that's the point. World War One, that's a bit of a grey area whether you can really pull that off. You know, it can be a bit of a stretch, you know, everybody's running around with prototype SMGs on a battlefield of the First World War. Yeah. Well, I mean, I might put a pin in that. And there are other games, you know, like Verdun and Tannenbaum, which I believe are a lot more accurate. But I might make another video on this topic. However, there is a game called War of Rights that actually did this better, from everything I've seen about it. You know? Because in the American Civil War, you don't have the kind of firepower needed to do that run and gun shooting that a game like Call of Duty would need, you know, to give it its pacing and stuff like that. So they didn't try to do that. I mean, I haven't played it because it's all multiplayer and I'm, you know, social anxiety stuff. But the point is, from what I've seen of the game, it's actually a lot more about coordination. Everyone plays their individual part. One player acts as the spotter with their binoculars going out, so they then call out to their teammates where to aim the gun. Others aim the gun, others load the gun, and you can have a whole squad in the game operating a single cannon, or perhaps in an infantry capacity, directing each other. But the point is, you're all working together to achieve the objectives which is how an army in the American Civil War would have operated. And so that will work there. So that's probably some of the big points here. Know your capabilities, and know what you're trying to achieve. Because after all, you could make it, and hey, if you want to make it more fantastical, you can, you know, play around a lot more, break away from the specific molds of the era, but you probably ought to introduce, I don't know whether I'm using the correct English word here, but more fantasy, more, basically, if you're going to make, in a sense, make sure that it's pretty clear that this is not replicating history, alternate history. Although, I'd recommend you watch someone like Matt Mitrovich, the alternate historian, if you want to know more about that. But, point is, so, yeah, that was what I'm doing on that subject. So now, let's talk about fixing Hearts of Iron. Now, I say fixing Hearts of Iron. Plenty of people enjoy it. Great. But there are those things that why I found it kind of tedious, Supply. It's one of those things just sitting there. Now, I can understand if I've got a massive division with loads of infantry, loads of artillery, loads of support companies in a desert mountainous region, quite far away from the nearest urban area, deep within some kind of like Yunnan province trying to dislodge a warlord, or in the sort of outer Mongolia kind of area. I can understand if I'm in somewhere like that with a massive great division that I'd be running low on supply. But I've had default starting divisions in the recent... this was especially with the supply system they brought in No Step Back. I've had supply issues with divisions, default starting positions, infantry without artillery support, a few battalions of infantry, maybe about 5, 6, something like that, and just one support company of engineers. And I've been out of supply in a province in Germany right next to a friendly supply hub that was connected to all the other supply hubs because I'd just been marching my guys along the railway track to make sure it was connected. I sometimes set it to the... to try, in an attempt to make the game a bit more interesting, ever since Man the Guns came out, I'd set the the German AI to do either democratic or restore the Kaiser. So, for that German Civil War scenario, because, hey, it can be a bit boring if you're just doing the same World War II over and over and over again. Speaking of which, yeah. Try and, maybe if there was a bit... I know it's a game, maybe it's a game focused on fighting war, fair enough. But there's a game that actually did it quite well. A game that's... it's set in the modern era, but still. Superpower 2 made war fighting really good. Had a really good kind of war fighting. So, supply hubs, that's a good feature. But give them range and have units with more equipment slowed down first. Essentially, so yeah, let me have loads of tanks in a division. Don't, when I'm churning out army experience, that... Well, anyway, I'll get onto that in a moment. But point is, have the range. A unit in range of a supply hub. I'm trying to remember how Superpower 2 did it, but either way, doesn't matter. So here's the idea. We've got the supply hub. That has a range. And that range is relative to terrain, units. So So that could be how you do it, actually. Instead of an in-supply, out-of-supply kind of thing, put that variable on equipment, on how long it takes for them to re-equip and reorganize. And speaking of which, how about instead of having to churn up army experience to the point where it can feel like, okay, I've got my optimal division, and now the enemy has their optimal division, so we're just sitting in trenches occasionally shooting at one another, and now I'm bored because there's really nothing else I can do. But instead of that, basically give me the freedom to instantly create customized to instantly create whatever division I want. Just like train individual battalions and shove them all together in a division. And punish me for creating stupid combinations. What I mean by that is, if I just create a whole division of big, heavy artillery and stick them out in the Gobi Desert, yeah, they'll probably be waiting for supply when the kingdom comes. But that's the point of strategy. You know, give me the freedom to do stuff, reward it if it's clever, punish it if it's stupid. Make it more... Speaking of which, don't bother with the air and naval supremacy requirements for launching amphibious invasions. Just have the navies move around and be able to intercept my transporting forces, so that if I just send out a load of troops unprotected, they get killed. They'll get sunk on the way. That sounds like a perfectly reasonable thing. Basically, give me the freedom to do that and make mistakes. Although then again, I have to say, not entirely sure. I'm not ultra confident in the AI in Hearts of Iron 4 sometimes. It's gotten better over the years, but they still seem to have a habit of having troops just sit there. I mean, I can remember games where the Allies have just been sitting loads of troops in Africa when they'd secured Africa. And I know, because my Icelandic volunteers had actually helped them secure Africa. You know, we'd cut off the Italian army, allowing Monty's 8th Army to just roll them over. Practically, just distracting the Afrika Korps in Tobruk long enough for the Canadians for the Australians to come in and encircle them, and by taking Benghazi. So I was like, okay, well, we've secured Africa, guys. Yep, that's great. Oh, and the Americans have joined the war. Great, we're gonna go liberate Europe now. We've had naval and air supremacy in all the sea approaches since the start of the war. And what do you guys do? Okay, you're piling so many British Commonwealth and American divisions in the British Isles, and you're not doing anything. I start 2 civil wars in Germany in this game. I mean, yes, the Germans crush them quickly, but like, you're not even going for the Italian mainland, guys? Yeah. guys, I mean, they are thanks to those thanks to sparking two civil wars in Germany, having a democratic uprising. This was before La Résistance. At this point I only had the kernel edition of the base game and the Together for Victory DLC. So this was using the old system of coups, and to be quite frank, the spy system in La Résistance I barely used because there wasn't very much I could do, it seemed to take ages to actually do anything. But point is, anyway, the Germans were crushing my supplies. The Germans were winning those little rebellions that I was sparking, but that's the point. It was mainly to distract them, basically open up another front, which my other allies weren't doing, but, they were sort of stalling on the Eastern Front. The Soviets were managing to make life hard for them, so I was like, okay, I've got my Icelandic division here. You guys want to do anything? How about I just pop over the English Channel to show... And I launched the amphibious invasion. And, I landed in Cherbourg. No one was defending it. Just went into Normandy. Trying to remember exactly. I think I even started to liberate Belgium before anyone on either the Axis or the Allies had even comprehended what was happening. Now, to be fair, the AI has improved since then, and if the player does manage to do something like that, they usually will reinforce the landing. But still, it can be pretty hard if you're just waiting for the AI to do stuff. But let's make it better. What if, when two divisions are fighting, as opposed to like that sort of bubble, one's on one province, they're like bang bang, doing that thing with the thing. What if they can share a region and it creates a little fight cloud, but you can then click on, and it opens up a battle window. Yes, this was the feature in Superpower 2. I knew I was talking to. And suppose you could give order, not direct orders, but a battle plan. You could select the, the general would pick one themselves, the commander would pick one themselves, and you could override that. And hey, that could create some interesting role play. You could literally role play telling the tanks to stop before Dunkirk. That actually happened. An order came through from Berlin telling the 8th Army... No, not the 8th Army. What am I talking about? Telling the Panzers to stop. And if I remember rightly, historians to this day are not sure why that happened. Whether it was Goering claiming that the Luftwaffe could wipe out the BEF on his own, whether it was supply concerns. Either way, why not roll that into the game? It's historical. Perhaps even, little decision things come up. Say, there's a battle coming up and, I know, you get a message from General Paulus, who's fighting in Stalingrad, that forces inside the city have been encircled. Should we attempt to break out? Yes, no, your call, General. You might be thinking, well, why wouldn't you? Well, fun fact, if I remember right, another thing that was interesting, I remember reading somewhere that... wasn't watching on TV, but either way, more to the point, during the Battle of Stalingrad, Goering again insisted that the Luftwaffe could supply the 6th Army. The Luftwaffe on their own could keep up the supply, there was no need for a breakout. And perhaps you could roleplay that sort of idea. After all, it's historical. the economy system of Hoi 4, I have to admit, it feels a little bit weird. After all, it seems to be in some kind of, I don't know, Marxist idea, because money just doesn't exist in the world, hence why you're trading factories, which means you can't, which really puts you off buying resources. I mean, why not? And why not have your consumer goods do something good? Maybe if your consumer good, you got more consumer goods, troop morale goes up, and consumer goods generate money, which you then use to buy resources on the market to keep your factories going. And thus the balance, balancing whether you're producing consumer goods, technology goods, capital goods, which help you build more factories. Yeah, I'm basically thinking of largely bringing back the Hearts of Iron free economic system. Yeah, that one probably worked a bit better. But maybe something like that, and borrow something else from Superpower 2, perhaps. Bit more more customization, more options. So that, why not have sectors in the economy? As in specific sectors. You don't have to produce loads of them, but even just a few. Like legal, illegal, and they can have little events pop up depending on what decisions you make, and passive bonuses, that sort of thing. So, why not do that? And you could set the sectors to be public or publicly owned or privately owned, illegal or legal. Oh, perhaps. Sounds fun to me. And you can do stuff like make the press. So if you have the press, for example, set to government, so you could have government prayers. You maybe make the press illegal, so that you get complete control over propaganda. Thus, you can, that can play into morale factors, or legalise it. All these have that kind of customization in your laws. And speaking of laws, let's talk politics. Now, I do not know very much about politics at all. It's a very confusing subject for me. So I'm not going to say... But thing is, in Hearts of Iron 4, there are 4 ideologies, stroke political parties, stroke forms of government, stroke forms of state. It seems to be a bit merged. I'm sure people will be able to tell. And those are communism, fascism, democracy, and non-aligned, which seems to cover all sorts of things like military dictators, Chiang Kai-shek's China, absolute monarchy, anarchy, as of La Résistance. The anarchists also get to be in this sort of catch-all umbrella kind of thing. And you'd have to ask President Sunday whether this makes any sense whatsoever. Because I don't know. But I don't know, it just seemed a bit odd. And, you know, there is a small rule set and then some, like, national spirits that will modify these. I'm thinking, what if they had, like, customizable laws? To help you make differentiations between different things. You know, Superpower 2 had this sort of thing, but to be honest, modders have brought in different laws that can affect the playstyle. I mean, take Road to 56, for example, with it. I mean, that's a collection of mods, but still, you know, different laws, different ideologies. They've all been added by the modding community. So that you can get different customizable effects. Sort of giving you... So that, yes, it can ultimately be about fighting a war. But it can also give you more options for how you fight your war. With a sort of bit more fleshed out, with this kind of fleshing out of the economic system, the political system, and the military system. Well, hope you enjoyed this little ramble, and hope you're having a nice day, and, well, if you like how it is at the moment, if you like Hearts of Iron as it is at the moment, great. If you don't, great. Hope you're having a very nice day, and, whatever your thoughts on various things, it was lovely having you here.